there for you.
Questions come in through chat. So I'm Jamie de Trinidad, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Student University Partnerships. And so my role is really just to help you guys understand about medical school options. In particular, I'm here representing 2 medical schools, which is really nice because now you get to learn about 2 different programs in the same meeting, and they're sister schools. So even though like I'm here talking about those schools and their sister schools, they are 2 separate schools, right? So we can go to the next slide. Oh, go to the next one. That's me.
Yeah.
And the next one too.
And the next one.
And there, that's good. So I'm here representing American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine, as well as Ross University School of Medicine. And really the biggest, I guess, the biggest like message I hope that you get from this whole presentation is that there are options for medical school, and there are obviously, you know, about the competition of applying to medical school, right? So just keeping those options open and making sure that you're finding the right program and the right fit for you. I'm really, really passionate about what I do because there are a lot of students out there that don't get the opportunity to do what they're passionate about. And this is just kind of a graph from the AUC to just show you how many students apply versus how many people are accepted in the U.S. Medical programs. I think you guys, this is all like not new information, right? If you're pre-med, you know from day one how extremely competitive it is. So I guess question for you guys: what year are you?
I'm a senior.
You're a senior, okay. You're a junior, okay. So you're like getting to the point where you need to apply soon, or you probably maybe already have.
I'm going to in the summer, so yeah.
Yes, yes. So what have been some of the like challenges that you've seen, or the obstacles that you've had to like kind of overcome in that process?
For me right now, finding shadowing opportunities
Yeah.
is where I'm
Yeah.
getting hung up. But yeah, just finding experience opportunities, classes.
Yeah. Have you always been pre-med?
I'm actually a chemistry major, but my tentative plan was always to do either PA or medical school. Yeah.
And how about you, Megan?
I would.
Well, I would love to hear your story, but we'll get to that later. We'll get to that maybe another day. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Just to kind of paint a picture, why do you think, and let me ask your opinion, why do you think it is so competitive to matriculate into medical school in general? What are your first thoughts?
I think so many applicants are already so high achieving, already have such a high GPA and then CAT and all that. But
Yeah.
having a high GPA and CAT doesn't really set you apart too much.
Yeah.
You know, everyone does.
Yeah, and also if you don't have, so this is a national average, 3.73 and 5.11, and those are just, those are averages, right? So some schools are probably much higher than that. Like if you don't have a 4.0, it's pretty difficult to get looked at because, like you said, everybody applying has a 4.0. And I was at the University of Las Vegas, their medical school has 60 seats, and they get like 3,000 applications. So it makes it really hard. And the biggest challenge is that what's on paper doesn't really help. It doesn't really explain the story. It doesn't. You can have a 3.8, and maybe you're really good academically, but do you really know how to learn? And those are 2 different things. And if you have a 2.9, you might know how. You might really have a really good handle on it. It just took you a minute to get there, right? So you don't get to really talk about that until you get to an interview, right? And if you are having a school with 60 seats and you have 3,000 people applying, you can be sure that they're not interviewing 3,000 people. And unfortunately, that's the dilemma, right? It's like, yes, it makes sense. Like if I was in med school and I had 60 seats and I had 3,000 apps, I'd be like, well, like I've got to look at the GPA and the MCAT. Like that, I have to figure out a way to to manage this load of applications. And unfortunately, there's a lot of really qualified medical students that just don't get the opportunity. They don't even get to the interview stage. So, you know, having that average of the acceptance rate 42%, not nationwide, and that's the average. It's very like, it's disheartening, right? As a med student, pre-med student, you're like, what do I gotta do? What do I gotta do? I need experience, I need this, I need that. We're trying to cram it all into 4 years, and it's intense, right? So what I hope the message that you take from this is that, you know, everybody has a different pathway to medicine. If you don't have to go to med school right after you graduate, like you can take time to really make sure that your application is strong. You can take time to make sure you want to do this. You can get more experience, but it has to be very pointed. You have to know I'm doing this for this reason, right? So next slide, please. At AUC and at Ross, we will interview on average more applicants. Most applicants, not every applicant, but most. And what this allows us to do is hear the full story before the committee makes a decision. So you have the opportunity to talk about how you studied, how that changed, how you evolved as a student, you know, what you learned doesn't work, what you learned works, study techniques. You also have the opportunity to really talk about your motivations for medicine. And that's what the committee needs to know. Like they don't want to see it 4.0 through 525 MCAT doesn't tell a story. What is your story? And once we get that, then the committee can make a decision if it's the best fit for you, right? So we believe everybody has that, you know, should have that opportunity. Next slide, please. I always like to just start with the success rate because I know that there's like sometimes presentations will build up. We have really awesome success rates with both residency. You can, I think, one more click, and then one more. Yeah. So I know, right? Put it all up at once. We have a very comparable. If you look at the 92, this is AUC specifically, 92% first-time residency rate this year, 93% first-time step one pass rate. And why this is important is to show you the quality of the program. These are very comparable to U.S. medical school numbers. So the fact that we have students coming in that may on paper not look great just goes to prove that, and then coming out with these results just goes to prove that there are a lot of people that are missing that opportunity if they don't consider these opportunities, right? These medical programs. And then we'll look at the raw statistics after this too. I think 2 more clicks maybe. Awesome. And again, 92% first time, 91%. It's okay. It's basically to show you that they do very well in both programs, both schools. Sorry. That's okay. It's recorded. All right. So now I want to just break down the program because a lot of the questions I get is like, well, what is going to med school in the Caribbean like? You know, am I gonna lay poolside all day? The answer is no. You will not. In fact, I know students who have never stepped foot in the ocean until like their 5th semester after their comp exam because they're done. And they were like, I do not want to go and have that be a distraction. The view is beautiful. I love it here, but I'm not going to go to the water, be a distraction. So it can be a very, very expensive vacation, or it can be medical school and not both, right? So first 2 years, whether it's at Ross or AUC, you're on the campus in the Caribbean. So AUC is on the island of St. Martin, and Ross is on the island of Barbados. You do have with Ross an accelerated option. I can talk more about that if you have questions, but it is something that you pick out that you decide after your first semester. It's one of the little differences between the programs. Curriculum is pretty similar. We both use a systems-based, organ-based curriculum, but that's kind of one of the slight differences. And then, of course, the islands are different. After you are on campus for 2 years, then you come back to the US and you do your step 1. So you guys are familiar with the USMLE? It's called the United States Medical Licensing Exam. If you go to med school, anywhere you go, this is going to be required. You have to pass these exams to graduate, to get your residency. All right. So number one thing, our students are they're doing the same exact exams. Right. So step 1 you take before you enter clinical rotations, which is your 3rd year. And then 3rd and 4th year, your clinical rotations. After your 3rd year is when you usually take your step 2. And then after that, after your 4th year, you graduate. You have your ND, and you're not done yet, unfortunately. Wouldn't that be great at 4 years of med school and you're out there practicing? So you actually have to do what's called a residency. And that is where you're kind of getting paid a little bit, and you're working in a hospital and you're in a specialty of your interest, but you're still learning. Like, you're still trying to learn and absorb all this information so that you can go out there and be the best doctor that you can. And after that, you probably might do a fellowship. So this is a path of like 10 years, right? On average, 10 years. I mean, maybe sometimes like a year or two less, depending on what your specialty is. It's definitely not something to take lightly. It's definitely not something where you're like, I'll just go and see if I like it. You know, like in undergrad, we have that privilege, right? You could be like, oh, I'll just go try this class and try that, you know, and it's great. That's what elective years are for. But this is definitely not something you want to just go and like see if you like it. So just be planned for that. Next slide. All right, I want to talk a little bit about our campuses. Next slide. Because I myself, when I interviewed for our medical school AUC, I had no idea what a campus, medical school campus in the Caribbean would look like. And I really did. My first thought was like a really grimy room, like, I don't know, like a little like room, like brick wall room with like a skeleton in the corner. That was my first image. I remember it very, very clear. And what I can tell you about both of our campuses is they're super high tech. We've had pre-med advisors come to our campuses. They're like, our med schools don't even have this. Like, we have at AUC, and I think at Ross too, they have ultrasound lab, you know, and not every medical school will have that. So they're always looking for ways to give students the experience with the technology that they're going to use out there in the profession, including virtual anatomy dissection tables, advanced anatomy app. AUC does have both that virtual anatomy tables as well as the cadaver lab. So that's one of the other differences. Also, you can go to the next slide. Simulation centers. So even though your first 2 years is like your basic sciences, like your medical sciences, you're still going to get clinical experience, but it's going to be in a really safe learning environment because you're going to work in a sim center, which basically looks like a hospital, and you're going to work with sim mannequins. Have you guys ever seen those before? Tell me about it. What was the experience like?
It was kind of weird because it literally felt and looked like a real person.
Yeah.
But it was an animatronic, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool because it really was like practicing on a person, but like it was still like the skin was like slightly synthetic.
Yes.
Yeah. It was weird, but it was cool.
Yeah, and they have very they're high tech ones. They even have like birthing sim mannequins, and so you just get like a really incredible experience where you can make mistakes and like really learn without, you know, without penalty of like fear of like hurting somebody, right? So you build a confidence that you don't get necessarily when you're like thrust in a room right away with a patient, right? You guys have clinical experience at all right now?
I have a little bit just because I work at a hospital, and so I have worked like I work at the VA
Okay.
medical center, and so I worked in the wound care and
Yep.
ICU and research environment.
So was it a little like intimidating to work with patients right
A
away?
little bit, especially because they're older, and
Yeah.
so they're a lot more fragile, but also a lot more aggressive. So it's a little bit scary.
Because they can be, right?
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm good. And I hope you get some hands-on experience too. I mean, and, you know, it's probably important to get that experience. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. So we have the simulation center. ICM, Intro to Clinical Medicine, starts first semester. And like I said, you're in the hospital sim center. First semester is going to be pretty light. You're going to do some basic, you know, kind of quick patient vitals and things like that. Every semester will get more complex. In your 5th semester, you're actually doing a surgical rotation at the hospital, and you're working with standardized patients, and you do a full examination, male and female examination with hired patients that come on. So you will get such good experience before you go out there into actual rotations. Excellent. All right, and then this is important because our medical schools traditionally are going to have a little bit of larger cohorts, right, than some US med. Some US med schools are in the hundreds, I believe. It just depends on the program. So it's really important for you to get small hands-on learning, with small groups, and both AUC and Ross have that set up for you outside of lecture. So outside of lecture, which is your whole cohort, then you'll have this small group learning. ICM is one of those. So ICM, you're going to have a very small group, maybe 10 people versus like 150, right? And then also there's tutoring, peer tutoring sessions. You can become a peer tutor. There's anatomy TAs, all of that. So you do have the support. There's also a really big advantage to faculty at our schools not being, for our institutions are not research institutions. And what that means is we don't require faculty to do research on our behalf. Where there's a plus side of that is usually faculty that come and work for our schools have done that many years, maybe at other medical schools in the US or abroad, and they bring that knowledge and then they get to spend 100% of their time teaching. So they're not really distracted or torn between research and teaching. And so their office hours are available and they're widely available for students. And this is a big piece of what helps students succeed because they can go to them and get that support. All right. And then continuing on with support, we have, both institutions have their own support teams. They might be named differently, but they have the models that best support the students. Beyond the faculty and beyond the TAs and the tutors and all of that, there's also a focus on mental health, right? So a wellness center, counseling, because it's a very stressful time and you really experience a lot of emotions as a med student. In fact, I was just talking to the Uber driver today about imposter syndrome and how every med student pretty much has that. And it's just important to understand that that's normal, right? And have that support. So wellness, there's academic centers for more of the academic guiding. And so it's just a way for us to say, hey, we have all this here, we're putting it out there for you. But as a med student, you have to also know, like, I need this help, right? So you have to come to those departments. All right. Let's go continue on and talk about our campuses. So the top photo is the Ross campus at Barbados. The bottom photo is AUC. And Ross is actually new in Barbados. They just built the campus out there about 2-3 years ago. It's one facility. It's like an 80,000 square foot facility. So everybody uses one building. AUC has two main buildings, the kind of bottom left corner, and then across you can't see. You can't really see because it's not built yet. It's the old book. So there's two academic buildings. On the right hand side is student housing. So it's kind of like all together. So there's a little bit different flavor for the campuses, right? But they're both really, like I said, lots of technology, lots of student support, and easy to transition into. Next slide. And getting there, I mean, for me and for coming from here, it's a bit tough to get out all the way to the East Coast and then down just because of the time zone changes, right? But the good news is that both St. Martin and Barbados have direct flights from cities like Miami, Atlanta, New York, Chicago, I think. Well, no, scratch that, not Chicago. Somewhere in North Carolina, I believe, Charlotte. So you can get there and there's flights every single day. So if you need to get home easily, it's not like a little island where you have to like take a little hell jumper or get on a boat. There's big, huge airports that have tons of people coming in every day. Continue. Campus housing is available for both AUC and Ross. The top photo is the Ross housing, which is about a 15-minute shuttle ride from the campus. They have a shuttle bus that is continuously going. And then AUC's housing is on the campus. So it's right there. AUC also has off-campus student housing, which is like across the street. So you have no worries that you don't have to stress out about finding where to live, which is really good. We always want students to get involved too, because you have to have a balance. You have to have a balance. Are you guys involved in any organizations here?
I'm in a sorority.
In the sorority, okay.
Not related to school.
Okay.
Just like sports.
Well, that's cool. Well, I mean, and that's what I mean. Like, you need to have a balance, right? You can't just put your nose in a book all day long. It will not work. If you do that in med school, it will not work. And I've actually talked to a graduate who failed all her exams first semester and went to her faculty and was like, what the heck? I'm studying all day long. And she's like, well, what else are you doing? She's like, nothing. Well, that's why. And then she just, added something in her schedule. And after that, she started getting better grades. So a lot of pressure on herself right there. But these also are ways for you to kind of mix things up and I'll get experience that you're interested in. So maybe you want to explore a specialty like surgery or pediatrics, you can get involved in those groups. Maybe you really want to be a leader, so you want to be like the president of the Student Government Association or get involved in that. And you certainly can do that at both AUC and Ross. And we'll talk a little bit about the clinical years. Years 3 and 4 are your clinical years. So at this point, you not on the island anymore, you've already taken step 1 and you're going into your clinicals. Year 3 is your core rotations, which are all required. So these are all required for you, every student, right? Every student has to take these rotations. Elective rotations are just that. Like everybody's gonna have different electives. You might want to do a pathology rotation. You're like, heck no, I don't want to do pathology. You might want to do radiology. So you'll go and you'll do your different electives. We also like to call these interview years, this interview year, because wherever you're rotating, it's really good, especially if you're really interested in that specialty, to make a good performance, because that way the program directors are there, they write good letters, and it's just so much easier for residency placement. So yeah. This is a list of our core sites where you can also do, I don't know why that looks weird like that. That's okay. But this full list is on our website too. It's just the slide is like kind of messed up. So you can look online. We don't have anything in Idaho. Are you guys from Idaho? Okay, where are you from?
I'm from Montana, so basically I'm never.
So basically,
I
I
never
don't
really
know.
attached to this.
I'd rather
area. I
Idaho.
don't want to travel, so I'm not really.
No worries. They're really all over, and this is actually something that's pretty unique to our schools, because you can choose to go to multiple hospital sites if you want, which is really cool, because you can get a different exposure to different socioeconomic backgrounds, to different, I don't know, city versus more suburban areas, areas that have maybe a more higher prevalence and things like gunshot wounds and all of those high trauma things versus maybe a smaller area where it's like more of a family, like a family medicine doctor, and they're more of a suburban where they do more things than maybe a family medicine doctor would do in a city where there's much more availability. So that is something that is unique, and you can do that in U.S. medical school, but for the most part, if you're going to a medical school here, you do everything at that hospital, right? So this is really cool and different. And you can stay in one spot if you want. You don't have to go moving around. This is a list of some of our residency outcomes from this year. And I really like this slide because this is really the culmination of everything, right? This is the success of the student. We are there. We're kind of like the training wheels on the bike, and then slowly we take the training wheels off, and eventually you're doing everything on your own, and here is what you've done. So some of these specialties are extremely competitive. Orthopedic surgery is pretty much the most competitive specialty there is besides ophthalmology. And other things like neurology and pediatrics, even radiation oncology at Case Western, that's huge. So these students are pretty much guaranteed. They weren't all 4.0 GPAs and really strong MCATs. But again, they were able to demonstrate in their interview how they could handle medical school rigor, why they're really passionate about doing this. And they put in the time and the work, and they made this happen. So this is kind of like my favorite, because I have met some of these graduates. I've interviewed them. My past experience is working directly in admissions for about 8 years, interviewing students, and then seeing them across the stage get their white coat, go to residency is really amazing. Just a quick look at where our graduates are practicing, and really this is to confirm that you can practice anywhere in the US with our degrees. And the biggest ratio of graduates are in California, Texas, and New York. You can go to the next one, and this is AUC. And the reason why that's important is those states tend to have the most stringent medical board approval process. So because we have the most alumni in those states, just kind of shows you the quality of the education, and there's no limitations. You don't do anything differently. You don't take extra tests or anything like that. You can accomplish the same things. Real quick about the application process. We're looking at everything else that most med schools are looking for, right? We do require bachelor's, we do require the prerequisites. We also require the MCAT. So those are all necessary components. AUC and Ross might have a little bit of difference between the prereqs, but if you're pre-med, you're pretty much gonna have taken them all. If you guys ever have questions about like what could count or what might be missing, you can reach out to me anytime. Personal statement, letters of recommendation. Any questions about the application requirement for itself?
When you say medically related experience, so like I worked at a plasma donation center, would that be considered medically related?
Yeah, so here's my spiel on the resume, right? I know that your mindset as a pre-med student is like, get stuff on my resume, right? That's what they have to do, right? It is so important that while you're getting things on your resume, it has significance to you and to your decision for pursuing medicine. Sometimes you take what you can get. I get that. I understand. I'm a realist. I get it. But while you're there, what are you learning? How does it apply to your decision to pursue medicine? If I could tell my 20-year-old self that self-reflection is such a strong and powerful tool, I would go back and do that. It took me till like 30 to figure that out. I pushed it. Journaling, it seems like a lot of work, and it is, because you're really having to think about things, but really reflecting. So yes and no, right? Because it depends on what you're getting from it, and it depends on why it's important to you. And maybe you're just, doing it to get exposure to the healthcare profession, but you need to work. And that's okay. But while you're there, what are you doing? Are you able to make connections? Are you able to have conversations with people in the healthcare profession? Can you do what I like to call informational interviews, where you just talk to somebody and be like, tell me about what you do and why you do it and why you love it and what you get from that. So yes, depends on what you get from it, absolutely. And that's what our committee wants to know. They would rather have somebody with maybe 2 different things on their resume that they just can talk about and what it's done for them than like 15 things that are just checklist items. And I think most medical schools are going to want that. I just know that, yes, like if you're applying to US schools, you do have to have a lot more because you got to differentiate yourself to get that interview. Just make sure that while you're doing those things, you're also gaining important knowledge from that and, what that means to you and applying to that school. Yeah, that's good. Okay. 3 semesters every year. This is the big difference as well, because both AUC and Ross have 3 incoming cohorts. What I really like about this is there's not as much pressure, right? There's not as much pressure, like a whole year in advance. You got to apply to US schools, right? Then you got to wait forever. Then you find out you don't get in or you're on a wait list. Then you got to do it all over again. And there's this pressure to like get everything done by a certain time. And it's fine. I get it. Medical school is not a cakewalk. Going to the Caribbean is not easier by any means. So you do have to have that sense of urgency and all that. But life happens, things happen. And so if you need more time after you graduate, if you need, for whatever reason, take a gap year, if you want to get more experience, you can apply for any of our 3 semesters. So January and May are smaller cohorts because everybody wants to start in September, and that's fine too. And you can apply, it's a rolling application. So remember how I said our committees are interviewing most applicants? It's because they're interviewing or they're reviewing applications. It's because we're interviewing on a weekly basis throughout the whole year. So you apply, you'll get a decision from the interview date within 1 to 2 weeks. And you can apply as early as a year out, or I like to say no less than 3 months out, because that just gives you time to kind of gather everything together. Some students have applied very last minute, and it's very case by case at that point. We do accept AMCAS and ACOMAS applications as well, and you have to apply on our websites. So you have to go to AUC's website or Ross's website and submit your application. Now you could be accepted, you could be denied, and in the denial case, there is a potential for you to reapply. Because we have these 3 semesters, if there's something on your application that needs to be improved, you might even be able to apply that same year, just depending on. So it kind of relieves a little bit of that pressure to be like, get everything in and maybe set yourself up not to do as well because you're trying to cram everything in. All right. And the third option is the MERT program. And this is pretty much the last piece of information I'll talk about. MERT is the Medical Education Readiness Program. So I really like this because what it is a conditional acceptance to our schools. The committee says, I feel like you're doing really well. You've shown some progress, you've shown some dedicated motivation. There's something that it's just, you're not ready yet for first semester med school. So if you do this semester of medical sciences courses, these are not prereqs, these are not biology, this is a first semester of med school, and prove to us that you can handle it. And on top of that, we're going to teach you how you learn medicine. So not the content, but how you actually study medicine. Some people don't have that yet, right? They're not prepared for it. So how do you handle this intense volume of information? How do you manage that? That's what they're teaching in this semester. And once you pass it, you would then matriculate to that medical school. So if you want to convert to AUC, you go to AUC. If you want to Ross, you go to Ross. If you don't pass it, they refund your tuition. You can't come to our medical schools, but now you don't have a bit, like you don't have a tuition bill. And you can go and say, oh, maybe you know what, I gotta go do post-bac, or I gotta learn this is where I struggled, so I need to go work on that somewhere else. So I really love this. And I think if you are considering post-bac programs because of a GPA, have a conversation with us, because this is a semester long versus like a whole year sometimes. Not always the case that this is the best route. Maybe post-bacs are better, but this is another option, and you're actually taking the medical science courses, learning from medical faculty. All right. Last thing is financial aid, because everybody wants to know how they're going to pay for medical school. And this is another indication of the quality of our programs, because we do participate in the U.S. federal financial aid process. Both AUC and Ross participate in the direct loan program and the federal direct graduate plus loan. And both of our medical schools have really good scholarship options as well. Some are based on academics. Once you're accepted, you're automatically given, and others you have to apply for. So we want to try to subsidize the cost as much as possible as well. And that should be it. I think we are, I think you can click through like 3 times maybe. There you go. One more. I hope that this was helpful for you guys, and hopefully you're good, right? You got all the information out there. Again, this is really just, these are opportunities, you guys, and I never want to, this is not to dissuade you from applying to U.S. medical schools. It's just to put it out there as another option. Personally, I think this is a really cool option, because not only do you get to tailor your degree, you get to live in another country, you get to experience different cultures, you get to meet people from all over the world, you get to travel, you get to become, when you travel internationally, you become more tolerant. This really applies to like how you can be as a physician too, right? And there's different things there that you can also consider, like we do even have rotations in the UK. We have global health electives. You can do a 6-week rotation in another country. So there's just really cool, unique things that you really, maybe you can get in the US, maybe you can't, but they're available for all of our students. And I've had some graduates say that because they went to AUC or because they went to Ross, like it made them a better person, a better doctor. They would have never had thought about things in the way that they did had they not gone to these schools. So, and that's that. And then just the second thing is just to not give up, right? Don't worry about what's on paper. Worry about how you're getting there. How you're getting there is so much more important than what's on paper. And there are always going to be opportunities for people that are prepared, whether it looks like that on paper or not. So that's it. You guys have any questions? Yeah.
I think you answered most of them.
Okay.
Do they have a matching program?
What's that?
Do they have a matching program to help match students to
Yeah.
places like that?
So part of the support that they get beyond the like on-campus stuff is they'll have the clinical advisor support to help put them in clinical rotations, as well as the residency advising. They have different names at the campus level. I think it's like career something at Ross and Office of Student Professional Development at AUC. And what they do is they have these sort of touch points throughout the 4 years. Like first year, you're not really gonna hear from them too much. Second year, you might get an introduction. Third year, when you're in rotations, they'll do hospital site visits. And then they're gonna start talking about the match process and what the strategy behind that needs to be. And then they help you understand the match application process. They're the ones that like get you the paperwork that you need. There's certain documentations that you need, letting you know like, hey, we need all your letters correct from your rotations, giving you advice. Like if you don't have all your letters of recommendation as an example, and you're not able to get them for whatever reason, sometimes depending on which semester you started, and they say, you know what, your application isn't ready for this match year, you need to wait. They're the ones that know best, right? And it's better to wait and get some more experience under your belt and then get that letter or get that one thing that you need to have a strong application. Because if you don't max that first year, it's like a 50% chance the second year. So it's better for you to take that time to do that. Like I said, medical school is not a rush. Like nothing is a rush. You don't have to rush there. So that's the advice, like that's the kind of advice that they're going to give, and they're going to make sure that they're going to support you through that process because it's in their benefit to help you guys. It's in our benefit. Obviously, we want positions. There's a huge in the next 12 years, the AMC did a survey on this, study on this, of a huge deficit of production of shortage of positions. I mean, right now we're already in one, but in the next 12 years, it's something between 40,000 and 120,000 shortage of positions in every specialty, a good portion in primary care. So that's what we're here for. We want doctors out there. I know me, I'm 41. I need doctors like when I get older. So it scares me to be like, oh my gosh, like, there's gonna be fewer doctors. So I'm out here evangelizing medicine. Like I want you to go to medical school because we need you guys. So.
I guess then I do have a question. So since you have the 3 start times, are there like disadvantages for start? Because I know that typically like schools here would probably start in September. So is there a disadvantage to start in May versus September, or what? How does that affect like applying the residency program?
Yeah. So actually January and May, I think give you more time because you're, think about it this way. You start in September, you have to do everything back to back to back to back. You have to get to that match year and it's a very limited time. And that's what I mean. Like if you somehow have to take a leave of absence or take a break or something, you might not have that letter, after your rotation or something like that. And it's not a big deal. You just have to go to the next match year. But if you start in January, May, if you take a leave of absence, if you have an emergency, you have that cushion of time. If you think of May semester, it's like the same match year as that following September. So you have like a whole semester cushion. Same with January, and then you have 2 semester cushion. Or if you do really well in January and you don't stop, you don't have any breaks between rotations, you could match in the same year as the previous September. You could, if you could finish in 3.5 years, especially with the Ross accelerated option. So you don't have to, you just have that cushion. So there's literally no disadvantages to any semester. September is just the most common one, right? It's when everyone graduates in May and they come in September. I do like January and May because they're on smaller class cohorts. May is kind of the sweet spot, I feel like, that I hear from people in May. But it's personal preference.
Just to clarify, so both of these are allopathics.
Yep. Yes. Thank you. Sorry if I didn't bring that up. I usually do. They are MD programs. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the types of experiences you've seen students bringing in since the whole COVID?
Oh yeah, so it's been I haven't been interviewing for the last year. So our roles shifted to more of the front end recruitment. But from what I understand, students are really having to scrounge for things. And there are a lot of virtual shadowing opportunities I've heard of. Have you guys heard of any of those? We're working on a partnership with HEAL. Have you heard of HEAL? HEAL. They just did a presentation with us a couple weeks ago. where students joined the presentation and they got like 1 hour of clinical shadowing because it was with a physician. They walked through a case and had them talk. So I would do a lot of research on virtual shadowing, and that could open up to some in-person stuff. I'm not sure about the local hospitals and clinics here that
Yeah.
was there ever like a lot of opportunities in
Yeah,
Florida?
there was. one.
And now there's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, it's going now.
Because it's kind of a catch-22, right? Like our committee understands that, but they also need to know why you want to do medicine. And if you haven't had that experience, it's really hard to define that, right? So you have to be really good at explaining why you want to do this. Research is a really good option. Are there research opportunities here?
Yes, if you're so like our chemistry students, they all have to do research, and same with the biology students. And then we try to provide as many opportunities to our students as we can to do research. We also have the vertical integrated projects center or office, and they do some research stuff, and students are allowed to sign up for those classes.
There's so I would get research experience, look at some lab experience if you can, because I've also talked to students who had lab experience and then they approached practicing physicians that were involved in research, and they said, hey, I have this really great lab experience, I'm learning about this, and I'm curious to see if you're involved in any research and if I can support your research in any way, like looking through journals and collecting data, and then you're establishing kind of like, I want to help you out versus, I'm just asking you for help,
Okay, so I have a lot of research experience, but because I'm a chemistry major, but since so much of my time has then gone into that, I think that's part of why my clinical experience, I've never worked in a hospital directly.
Yeah.
But I worked at the plasma donation center and stuff. Is that something that would be a real disadvantage that most of my time has been going into research?
No, absolutely not. MDs do research all the time. I mean, I've had interviews where all they have is research.
Okay. That's good.
But they had exposure to doctors through
So
that.
if I can get like some shadowing. and
Yes,
stuff like that.
definitely go that route. Whatever you're doing, if there's a doorway that opens and exposes you to something that will help you out, for sure. You don't, like I said, you don't have to have this checklist of things, and it's really tough right now, but use research as your foundation to say, like, what can I do from this? Like, what doors could open up for me through this, for sure.
I know some medical schools kind of vary the amount of hours you should spend on clinicals and shadowing. Do you guys have a specific amount, or is it kind of just selling up really long?
It is, we don't have hours. I'm sure most of you guys probably have like a list of like ideal like hour experience, or no?
No, not really. We try to talk to our students more about the same thing that you're talking about, experiences and reflecting and stuff like that. So
Because I think the reason why they give numbers is because they're like, if you just go and shadow 2 hours, like you're not really getting a ton of experience, right? So a lot of schools will have that as like, hey, through this, you'll probably get that experience that a school will look for. So it's not that they require that many hours, it's they think on average, if you have this many hours, you're likely to have that. If you can get that in less hours, you can, right? So I would rather have a student have fewer hours, but have a better quality experience, right? And I think our committee would too. So I don't know what that looks like. Unfortunately, I don't have a magic rubrics that will help with that, but more than 2, I would say, more than a couple hours, more than a weekend, because you have to be able to really share, your reasons. And think about like think about your non-clinical experiences. Think about, you can do research like medical doctor competencies, and they're everything from like compassion. Where do you demonstrate compassion? Like, what have you done community service? Have you volunteered? Have you helped out your neighbor? Like there are ways for you to reflect back on other things you've done that are not maybe formal, where you can say, oh, this is where this stems from. This is why I want to be a doctor. Like that's very meaningful. Yeah, so hopefully that helps.
perfect.
Trying to think of any other experiences. Student orgs are always good for leadership because as a physician, you are a leader, and you're having people follow you, and you're making decisions. So that's always a good experience too. Community service, volunteering.
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for having me. I think we're all done here. Let me know if you guys have any other questions afterwards. I'll send my email address. Well, you have mine, Megan, right? And then I'll send mine over to you. So thank you so much. Keep up the good fight.